Hi, my name is Keith, and today I'm going to do a testimony of God video. And what I was going to talk about is early on in my career as a firefighter, I ended up messing up my back on a medical call. The ironic part is we were responding to a patient that had back surgery and fell out of bed. Now this gentleman was fairly large, somewhere between 250, 300 pounds. I don't know, it was a long time ago, but I know he is a big dude. And what had happened was my crew had responded to this when we got on scene, and we were on scene for a while waiting for the private ambulance service to get there. My department at the time was not paramedic staff, so we couldn't give the guy any meds for pain. And we waited for the private ambulance to get there. And I don't know if they even gave him meds because he was already on narcotics for pain for his back. The call was quite a while ago, but so I don't remember if we gave him narcotics before he moved him. That's neither here nor there. But I remember this guy was in a lot of pain. He fell out of bed, and there was not a lot of room between his bed and his wall. It was very minimum amount of room. Basically almost enough to get what we call a longboard to roll him onto it. Not any room to lift him or anything like that. So we ended up getting this guy onto this longboard. And his house was carpeted. I remember that. We slid this longboard across carpet after we got him onto the board and strapped him in place and all that good stuff. And as we were sliding him across carpet on this board, he was like just in pain. You could tell like even moving him across the carpet was hurting. And discomfort. And so like I was getting a lot of sympathy for this guy. I was just like, wow, man, that looks like it sucks. And what had happened was we had to move this guy, that's why we had to slide him across the carpet, because we needed room to lift him onto this cot. And I remember we moved some furniture in this guy's house because everything was just super tight and small. And we still didn't have a lot of room to do have proper lifting for him on this guy. And long story short, we're doing something called a 4-point lift. So we're going to have one person on each corner of the longboard to pick it up and get this guy on the cot. So I remember I was on the patient's left side and the head end of this board, and like I said, I couldn't use proper lifting for him just because space was too narrow in this guy's house, and we had to get the cot in a certain area. And we had a guy from this ambulance service was at the head end on the other side, across from me. And we were going to do a 1, 2, 3 lift, and everyone was going to lift on 3 kind of thing. Done it countless times in my career prior to this. Moving patients and, just lifting it as like a unit, So this guy, I remember he got to 2 or something. It was before it was lift. He started lifting. And what had happened was, it was either going to crush my hands or I don't remember exactly if I was feeling sympathy for the patient because I saw how much pain he was in when he was moving. And realized I was going to cause him discomfort to tilt the whole board with him on it. And so I went and I lifted anyway, and I had poor lifting posture and all that stuff just because there was a space, and I ended up hurting my back, because I got a majority of the guy's weight, because that majority of the guy's weight's at his, torso end, and this guy was giving it to me on the other side. So I made a split-second decision to pick up the board so this guy would suffer or my hands wouldn't get crushed, whatever the case was going to be. And anyway, I did that, and I ended up messing up my back pretty bad. ended up having back surgery as a result of this. This was still when I was of the world and all that good stuff. And yeah, I went through this whole steps. I was off work for a long time. You know, prior to having surgery, I was off for like a month and a half, 2 months. And lo and behold, I went through physical therapy and all that after my surgery. And I was just going to say a couple comments that my doctor told me after my surgery. So I ended up having a herniated disc. So what had happened was there was part of my disc in my back that was pressing on my sciatic nerve in my right leg, and it was like bad. I was on narcotics prior to my surgery. You know, I needed them to almost like function, even find any sort of semblance of comfort, which was very few and far between, even with that stuff. And I end up, like after my surgery, my doctor had operated on me, told me like 2 comments. He did an MRI on my back, and he said like, oh, I had a herniation that was like so big. You know, I don't know like how many millimeters is considered big or bad, you know, whatever. He didn't seem too concerned with what it was on the MRI. But after the actual surgery, he just told me it was bigger than that, and he didn't even tell me how big it was. He just said I shouldn't have been walking, even on narcotics and all that stuff prior to my surgery. And I was walking around, I mean, not very well, but I was able to at least walk and function somewhat. So I count that as a blessing to God, because like having a nerve that's pinched that bad for that long, I very easily could have like permanent nerve damage, you know, for like a month and a half, you know, like, and my nerve was pinched as bad as he described it. That could have been the end of my career, and I could have been permanently like disabled and all that good stuff. So, because that was one blessing that God gave me. The second thing, I'm not sure if it was the same day or whatever, it could have been, but he told me, like, made a comment like that most people, you know, that recover from this type of injury recover in 8 to 10 weeks. Then he kind of looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, you, my friend, not so lucky. He said, with your job, it'll probably be like 12 to 16 weeks of therapy, you know, before you can return. And yeah, you know, I'm sitting there kind of like, you know, at first I had my hopes up, and then they came crashing back to reality after the second part of his comment. So I ended up going through physical therapy. So I was doing everything according to like what the doctors wanted or a therapist wanted, going to regular checkups with a physician, and yeah, I ended up recovering kind of like around 10 weeks. And my therapists were running out of things for me to do, and they're like, hey, you know, they're like, hey, we gotta send this guy back to work, kind of thing, because they literally couldn't, you know, they literally weren't having anything for me to do. Like, I was maxing out machines and all kinds of stuff like that, and they weren't worried about my strength or anything. I just felt kind of weird. I felt weak in certain ways, like, and it's my body, you know, I know my body, so like I really didn't want to go back to work just yet. But at 10 weeks they tested me to come back to work, and they had one simple test, and I was like super close to passing it, and I just intentionally failed it just because, like I said, I know it's my body, and I didn't feel quite right to go back to work yet. I didn't want to push it and hurt myself, you know. I think a lot of people would kind of understand that and side with that at that point. That, you know, there's no point in like rushing a return back, especially from a pretty significant injury, and that would have been way ahead of schedule anyway. However, by the end of like the next week, I was actually feeling really, really, really good. You know, if they would have tested me again, that would have been like fine going back to work. passed all the tests, but I guess we're going to test me every 2 weeks. So they tested me in 2 weeks, and I passed and returned to work. I got signed off by a doctor that I was clear to go back to work, and everything was good. And anyway, that was all fine and good, right? I went back and I met with my chief and assistant chief, who were like in their office. They're the only ones in the station. And I remember I had a note, and I was gonna leave it on the our chief that's in charge of each shift. I left it on his desk, and then I saw those two kind of talking, and I knocked on the door. And they were just like, hey, told me to come in, and then they were just kind of chatting with me, and I told them I was cleared to come back to work, and then she was like, oh, take more time off, and I'm like, I actually felt bad about it, because I was on work comp, and I'm like, I actually declined it, I'm like, I appreciate the offer, I think I told them I wanted to be a firefighter, that's what I signed up to be, And he kind of looked at me, he's puzzled, most people would have taken extra time off, And I'm like, no, it's not what I'm here for. I've been off long enough, and I didn't want to be doing this light duty stuff they're having me doing. Like I said, I don't want to be a firefighter, not doing paperwork and all kinds of other silly stuff. They didn't even really have anything for me to do. They were making stuff up. At the time, it was kind of interesting. But anyway, I just kind of want to transition to something else, that was in 2004, or that was in 2004, sorry. This was something I really didn't realize at the time. Kind of started in the 1990s, I was in college, or college age at the time. I used to be super patriotic. One of my favorite holidays used to be the 4th of July, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of like that holiday just didn't seem to mean anything to me. I didn't realize I wasn't in a free country anymore, but it's just like that holiday just, it didn't do anything for me. I'd still quasi-celebrate, and the only reason I quasi-celebrate is because my family would go, and we go over to one of my uncle's houses. So I'd visit with my aunt and uncle, and then other family would come over there too. So I'd see, my aunts and cousins, and my aunts and uncles, and also my cousins. So I'd spend time, and that was the main reason I'd go, was just to see them and hang out with them. It wasn't really so much to celebrate the 4th. I was just kind of didn't really do much for me anymore. And neither did a lot of the other holidays, like Labor Day, Memorial Day. I was just kind of whatever. However, I was still celebrating Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, days like that. And I remember it was the last few months of my marriage. My ex-wife, my birthday is in December. Not that it really matters. She ruined me financially, and she wanted to take me somewhere for my birthday. She wanted to take me out to a restaurant, blah blah blah, and then take me out to a special hotel where they did massages and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't want any of this. Our finances really sucked at the time, because she spent me to oblivion. And I was paying for it anyway, because she wasn't really working or doing anything. So I was like, no, this is stupid. I don't want this, And that was kind of the beginning of me not really having any interest in my birthday. So I guess I kind of owe it to my ex-wife for that. We ended up getting divorced I don't know, 4 months later. 4 months after my birthday. she filed for it and all this good stuff, you know, after having affairs and all kinds of other stuff on top of it. So that was kind of like Mac's wife started me in the process of not really liking birthdays. I guess I owe her for that. Give her a big thank you. And then later I kind of found a YouTube channel. And this guy would talk about like the pagan origins of, you know, Christmas and other holidays. He wasn't really a Bible preacher. What his channel was about was exposing conspiracies. You know, so he is pointing out that all the or pretty much most of the celebrities were Satanists, and they were using signs and symbols to like basically indoctrinate the masses in like music videos, movies, and other kinds of things like that. So he's kind of breaking down like a lot of repetitive symbology that these people are using in their videos and whatnot, their songs, their lyrics. And you know, that kind of woke me up that, hey, there's a lot more going on in the world than I realized. And so long story short, you know, he was talking about Christmas and Easter being pagan days, so I stopped celebrating them. And every once in a while he'd read some Bible verses, you know, and I'd never really paid any attention. I just realized those were wicked days and wanted to burn them. So I kind of stopped celebrating those. Oh, yeah, cold turkey. And now it's kind of around 2018, 2019. You know, as I was slowly waking up. Doesn't mean like, you know, I absolutely knew what was going on at the time. I was just like, oh, I'm not supposed to do these days. So I mean, it was a long process with me. And anyway, like I used to go to church with my parents a lot, especially my mom, because she really wanted to go. And you know, I'd go to almost appease her. I was never really a fan of it. And so, like, long story short, you know, I'm going to church and with her, and then like I ended up moving out of the city in 2001 to start my career. So I moved the opposite side of the state. I never really saw a church after that. And the only times I'd actually go to church after that was with my mom if I came back to visit, or with my parents, I should say, if I came back to visit them, and it was like on a Sunday. I was there for a Sunday because I worked a different work schedule, so I wouldn't always have like weekends off like most people. And so I mean, if there was a Sunday that fell when I was off, I'd go to church with them. If not, I wouldn't. And then I'd go to church like if I was off for Christmas and Easter. A lot of times I had to work those days, and yeah, so that is what it was. But you know, so I was slowly kind of like removing myself from the church. You know, I think that was God separating me from my family, you know, as part of his plan for me. And yeah, you know, that is just what it is. In my case, you know. And then in 2000, yeah, I just felt compelled, in 2020, I kind of felt compelled to start reading my Bible, and I was super slow at it, you know. And yeah, I picked it up, I read it, you know, but I really was kind of like, oh, whatever. And then in 2020, like, you know, I saw a YouTube channel appear in my feed like 3 days in a row.
In half a mile, use the left 2 lanes to take a slight left to stay on I-65 South. Signs for Louisville, I-70 West.
Anyway, So that happened like 3 days in a row. Like, I saw this YouTube channel, and this is like in December 2021. And yes, I actually really picked up my Bible and really started reading it. Got baptized again, and
Take a slight left to stay on I-65 South. Signs for Louisville, I-70 West.
And so long story short, going through this long awakening process. For me, I got, I don't know if it was a slow learner or I wasn't putting two and two together. But I was waking up nonetheless. And since then, my life changed. I follow God. I read the Bible, pray, trying to live a godly life as much as I can. Doing the charity thing, helping people, praying for others, trying to walk righteously, in accordance with God's will. And so that's just kind of like my story about how I kind of woke up. I said it was a long, slow process, but the pagan stuff just kept leaving my body or leaving my life. And the last thing I want to talk about is there's a guy I felt compelled to help one day. He works at a store that's a local store, like a small place. And anyway, this individual ended up having like a tooth abscess or an abscess tooth. So I felt compelled, like one Saturday, just out of the blue, just to like go over to this place and give him something. And it turns out like I didn't get there in time. I mean, this place closed at 12, and I got there like a few minutes thereafter. And this guy was gone, and
In half a mile, keep left to stay on I-65 South. Follow signs for Louisville.
And long story short, so this was like a Saturday, and I tried going over there. The place was closed on Sunday. And I don't remember if I went there on a Monday or Tuesday, because I might have like forgot about it on Monday. And I might have gone there Tuesday. That's not super important to the story. But anyhow, I ended up going to this place and seeing this guy. And
keep left to stay on I-65 South.
Which is what I felt compelled to go there for. And he ended up using this thing how I told him.
Continue on I-65 South for 109 miles.
And it helped him heal his tooth. Within a couple days, and I saw him a few days later in a Walmart, and he was perfectly fine. He said that thing was amazing. And all I gave him was like a metal coin, if you will. And it really helped heal him, and he was so grateful for that. Like, he couldn't believe it. So it was, a miracle basically that he was healed. And it was not like through medicine or anything else like that. Not through pharmaceuticals or antibiotics or whatever else. So yeah, it's just a personal testimony. I'm going to see if I can also interview this guy, have his part of the testimony in this video, or in one of my videos. I can tell this story again, and he can tell his side, what happened, and how it worked out and everything. So it's not just my word on it. Anyway, that's kind of like my fourth testimony of God. I'm going to close this video out. I hope people, or someone gets something out of this video, and inspire someone else to seek out God with all their mind, all their heart, and all their soul. I'll praise and glory to the Most High. Amen.